My sister slapped me during our college trip when I refused to pay for her shopping spree. But when I told my parents, they praised her actions. Why would you refuse? You know she always gets what she wants and she did you a favor because you were getting out of line, Mom said approvingly. Dad added, next time when she wants something, give it to her no questions asked, and if you don't, I guess we won't accept you anymore. Uncle agreed, finally someone put you in your proper place. Sister smirked, maybe now you'll think twice before being so selfish. But they had no idea I was secretly paying for her entire college tuition and all the household bills for years. So, I stopped every payment and left without a word. What happened next? My name is Whitney, and I'm 24 years old. This is about my younger sister Sloane, who's 21, and how my family's golden child treatment of her finally backfired in the most spectacular way possible. To understand this story, you need to know our family dynamic. Sloane has always been the favorite. She's the baby, the creative one, the one who could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. Meanwhile, I was the responsible older sister who got good grades, worked part-time jobs since I was 16 and never caused any trouble. Somehow, this made me less interesting to my parents, Gail and Roger. The favoritism started early. When Sloane wanted dance lessons, they found the money. When I wanted to join the debate team, they said we couldn't afford the travel costs. When Sloane crashed Dad's car at 17, they bought her a newer one for safety reasons. When I asked to borrow money for textbooks, I was told to get a job. So I did. I got scholarships, worked multiple jobs, and by 22, I had landed a great position at a Rogerating firm. The money was good, really good. And here's where the story gets complicated. I started helping my family financially without them knowing the extent of it. It began small. I'd slip Mom some cash for groceries, claiming I'd found a good deal and bought extra. I paid for Sloane's textbooks, telling her I got a discount through my old professors. When Dad's business hit a rough patch 2 years ago, I started covering the mortgage payments, funneling the money through a fake business loan he thought he'd qualified for. Then Sloane got into state university. The tuition was $36,000 a year, $18,000 per semester. My parents were panicking about how to afford it, especially with Dad's business still struggling. Sloane was in tears, thinking she'd have to go to community college instead. That's when I stepped in, anonymously. I told Sloane I'd heard about a grant program for students in financial need and helped her apply. What she didn't know was that I was anonymously funding the grant through a legitimate education foundation that allowed anonymous donors. As far as Sloane and my parents knew, she'd won need-based aid. The reality? I was paying $18,000 every semester out of my own pocket, plus contributing to her housing, meal plan, and living expenses. All told, I was spending about $45,000 a year on Sloane's college experience. But it didn't stop there. Dad's business never really recovered and Mom's part-time job barely covered groceries. So I kept up with helping them through carefully managed anonymous payments. I arranged for Dad to receive what appeared to be delayed payments from old clients, and I covered utilities by prepaying them through a third-party service. All told, I was covering about $3,500 in household expenses every month. My parents thought Dad's business was slowly improving because I was secretly supplementing their income through these delayed client payments. For 3 years, I lived in a tiny studio apartment, drove a B-top Honda, and wore the same clothes from college while funneling almost 70% of my income to my family. I told myself it was worth it to see Sloane succeed and to keep my parents' house out of foreclosure. I was the invisible hero of my own family's story. The breaking point came during Sloane's spring break trip. She was going to Miami with her sorority sisters, and as usual, she expected everything to be handed to her. The night before she left, she asked me for a little shopping money, just $800 so she could keep up with her friends. I was exhausted. I had just paid her $9,000 tuition bill for the spring semester, covered the family's mortgage payment, and was working 50-hour weeks to keep up with everything. I looked at her, standing there with her designer bags, that I'd indirectly paid for through the family money I contributed, and something in me snapped. Sloane, I can't give you $800 right now. I'm a little tight this month. Her face changed instantly. What do you mean you can't? You have a good job. You're being selfish. I'm not being selfish. I just don't have an extra $800 to spare. That's when she slapped me. Hard. Right across the face in our parents' living room. Don't lie to me, Whitney. You make good money and you live like you're broke. The least you can do is help your little sister out. I was stunned. My cheek was burning, and I could feel the handprint forming. Sloane had never hit me before, despite being spoiled. She wasn't usually violent. Mom and Dad came running when they heard the commotion. I expected them to be horrified that Sloane had slapped me. Instead, Mom looked at my red cheek and then at Sloane with something like pride. Why would you refuse? Mom asked me, her voice full of disapproval. You know she always gets what she wants, and she did you a favor because you were getting out of line. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She slapped me, Mom. Maybe you needed it, Dad chimed in. Next time when she wants something, give it to her, no questions asked. And if you don't, I guess we won't accept you anymore. Uncle Curtis, who had been visiting for the week, nodded approvingly. Finally someone put you in your proper place. You've always been too stingy with family. Sloane smirked at me, completely satisfied with the support she was getting. Maybe now you'll think twice before being so selfish. I stood there, face stinging, listening to my entire family tell me that I deserved to be slapped for not giving my sister $800 for a shopping spree. These were the same people whose lives I had been quietly holding together for 2 years. I didn't say anything. I just went home to my tiny apartment and sat on my second-hand couch, staring at the bank statements spread across my coffee table. Direct payments to the university, $18,000 per semester. Mortgage payments, $2,200 per month. Utilities, $350 per month. Car payments for Dad's truck, $450 per month. The fake business loan payments I'd been making to keep Dad's credit intact, $800 per month. I had been paying for Sloane's entire college experience and keeping my parents' house out of foreclosure while living like a broke student myself. And they thought I was selfish for not having an extra $800 for shopping money. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I started by calling the Education Foundation and stopping my anonymous donations. I explained that due to unforeseen circumstances, I could no longer fund the grant program. Sloane's financial aid would be discontinued at the end of the current semester. Next, I stopped all the carefully arranged delayed client payments I'd been sending to Dad. I also stopped prepaying the utilities and other household expenses I'd been covering anonymously. I didn't make a big announcement. I didn't send a dramatic text or email. I just stopped. Everything. The money that had been flowing from my account to keep their lives comfortable simply dried up. Then I did something I'd been planning for months but never had the courage to do. I put in my notice at my current job and accepted a position I'd been offered with a company in Seattle. The pay was even better, and it was a fresh start 3,000 miles away from my toxic family situation. I spent the next 2 weeks quietly packing my apartment and tying up loose ends. I didn't tell my family about the job or the move. As far as they knew, I was just giving them the silent treatment after the slapping incident. The first sign of trouble came about 10 days later. Sloane called me, crying. Whitney, something's wrong with my financial aid. The school is saying my grant has been discontinued and I owe $18,000 for next semester. Can you help me figure this out? I almost laughed. Have you tried contacting the foundation directly? That's just it, they're saying the donor can no longer fund the program. It's so weird. This grant has been covering everything for 3 years and now they're acting like the funding just dried up. That is weird, Sloane. I'm sure Mom and Dad will help you figure it out. 3 days later, Dad called me. His voice was stressed in a way I'd never heard before. Whitney, we need to talk. We're having cash flow problems. The delayed payments from my old clients have stopped coming in, and now we're behind on several bills. My heart was pounding, but I kept my voice steady. That sounds like those clients might be having their own financial issues, Dad. That's what I thought at first, but when I called them, half of them said they'd already paid everything they owed. The other half said they never owed me money in the first place. It's like I've been getting phantom payments for 3 years. It made perfect sense to me. By the end of the week, their entire house of cards was collapsing. The utility companies were sending disconnect notices. The car was about to be repossessed. Sloane was facing the reality that she might have to drop out of school or take on massive student loans. Dad's business was failing without the secret financial support I'd been providing, and Mom was panicking about potentially losing the house. That's when I got the call I'd been expecting. It was Mom, and she was crying. Whitney, I don't know what's happening. Everything is falling apart at once. The house, Sloane's school, your father's business, it's like we've been living in a fantasy and suddenly reality is hitting us all at once. That sounds really stressful, Mom. We need help. I hate to ask, but do you have any money saved up? Maybe you could loan us something to help us get through this rough patch? The irony was incredible. After being told I'd be disowned if I didn't give Sloane whatever she wanted, now they were asking me for help with the very expenses I've been secretly covering all along. I'm sorry, Mom, but I don't have that kind of money available. But my job pays me enough to cover my own expenses. I'm not sure why you'd think I have thousands of dollars lying around. There was a long pause. Whitney, if we lose the house, you should probably talk to a financial advisor about your options. I hung up feeling simultaneously guilty and liberated. The guilt came from knowing I could fix their problems with a few phone calls. The liberation came from finally being free of the burden I'd been carrying in secret for 2 years. The calls kept coming. Sloane called sobbing about having to get a job at the campus bookstore to help pay for her expenses. Dad called asking if I knew anyone who might want to invest in his struggling business. Uncle Curtis even called, apparently having heard about the family's financial troubles, asking if I could step up and help out my parents. Each time, I expressed sympathy but explained that I wasn't in a position to help financially. I wasn't lying, I wasn't in a position to help because I had decided not to be in that position anymore. What made the situation even more satisfying was watching how differently they treated me now that they needed something. Suddenly, I wasn't the selfish sister anymore. Mom started calling me sweetheart again, something she hadn't done since Sloane started college. Dad would begin every conversation with asking about my job and my life, pretending to care about my well-being when he barely acknowledged my existence for years. The most interesting call came from Sloane's best friend, Jessica, who I'd known since high school. She called me one evening, clearly having been put up to it by Sloane. "Hey Whitney, I hope you don't mind me calling. Sloane gave me your number." I immediately knew where this was going. "Hi Jessica. What's up?" "Look, I don't know all the details about what happened between you and your family, but Sloane is really struggling right now. She's working 3 jobs just to stay in school, and she's barely sleeping. She's lost weight, and honestly, I'm worried about her." I felt a pang of something, not quite guilt, but concern. Despite everything, I didn't want Sloane to suffer. I just wanted her to understand consequences. "That sounds really hard for her," I said carefully. "The thing is, she keeps saying that this is all because of some fight with you, and that if you just helped out a little bit, everything would go back to normal. I know it's not my place to ask, but is there anything you could do? Even just a small loan?" This was the moment I realized how deep the delusion ran. Even Sloane's friends thought this was just a typical sibling spat that could be resolved with a little financial assistance. They had no idea that I had been the invisible foundation holding up their entire lifestyle. "Jessica, I appreciate you caring about Sloane, but this isn't something that can be fixed with a loan. Sloane needs to learn how to manage her own finances and live within her means. It's actually a good thing that she's working and understanding the value of money. But she says she used to have a scholarship that covered everything, and now it's gone. Don't you think the school should honor their commitment?" I almost laughed. Scholarships have terms and conditions. If Sloane lost hers, she probably knows why. After I hung up, I realized that Sloane was still lying to people about the situation. She was telling her friends that she'd lost a legitimate scholarship, not that her anonymous benefactor had stopped funding her education. She was painting herself as a victim of bureaucratic injustice rather than taking responsibility for her actions. But the most revealing conversation came about a month later, when Mom called me at work. She was crying before she even said hello. "Whitney, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen to me." "Okay, Mom." "Your father and I have been talking, and we've been thinking about that night when Sloane asked you for money. We were stressed about everything that was going wrong, and maybe we didn't handle it the right way." This was as close to an apology as I was likely to get from my mother. "Maybe?" I asked. "Okay, we handled it badly. We should have supported you. Sloane shouldn't have hit you, and we should have been upset about that instead of taking her side. It was progress, but it felt hollow. They weren't sorry because they realized they'd been wrong, they were sorry because their lifestyle had collapsed." "Why are you telling me this now, Mom?" There was a long pause. "Because we need you to come home. We need our family back together. What you need is for your financial problems to go away. That's not. Okay, yes, we need help. But we also miss you. The house feels empty without you. Sloane cries all the time. Your father barely speaks. We made a mistake, and we want to fix it." I felt myself wavering for just a moment. These were still my parents, and despite everything, I loved them. But then I remembered the look on Sloane's face when she slapped me, and the satisfaction in Mom's voice when she said I deserved it. "Mom, if I came home right now and told you I couldn't help you financially, that I genuinely didn't have the money to solve your problems, would you still want me there?" Another long pause. "Of course we would. But would Sloane? Would she treat me with respect if I couldn't give her what she wanted?" "Sloane's learned her lesson. She's different now. She's different because she's facing consequences for the first time in her life. The moment those consequences go away, she'll go back to being exactly who she was." "You don't know that. Mom, Sloane is 21 years old. Her personality isn't going to fundamentally change because she had to work at a bookstore for a few months." The conversation ended with Mom crying and me feeling emotionally drained. These calls were taking a toll on me too. It would have been so much easier if I could just hate them completely, but family relationships are never that simple. What kept me strong was remembering how alone I'd felt that night. Not just physically alone, but emotionally abandoned by the people who were supposed to love and protect me unconditionally. They had chosen Sloane's entitlement over my dignity, and no amount of financial desperation could undo that betrayal. I also started thinking about what my life had been like before I moved. I'd been so focused on taking care of everyone else that I'd never taken care of myself. I'd been living like a monk, denying myself basic comforts so I could fund Sloane's sorority dues and spring break trips. I'd been working constantly, always stressed about money, always calculating how much I could afford to give without arousing suspicion. Now, for the first time in my adult life, I was living for myself. I bought clothes that I actually liked instead of whatever was cheapest. I went out to dinner without calculating whether I could afford it after sending money to my family. I started saving for my own future instead of funding someone else's present. The freedom was intoxicating, but it also made me realize how much I'd been sacrificing. I'd been so busy, being the invisible hero, that I'd forgotten to be the protagonist of my own life. That realization made it easier to ignore the guilt trips and emotional manipulation that continued to come my way. Sloane sent me a series of increasingly desperate texts, alternating between begging for help and accusing me of destroying the family out of spite. Dad left voicemails talking about family loyalty and how real families stick together through tough times. Uncle Curtis had the audacity to call me and lecture me about abandoning my responsibilities. The irony of that last one was particularly rich. Uncle Curtis, who had never contributed a dime to anyone's well-being, was lecturing me about responsibility while I was sitting in my Seattle apartment, finally free from the financial burden I'd been carrying for years. But perhaps the most infuriating message came from Sloane's boyfriend, Tyler, who I'd met a few times over the years. He sent me a long text about how Sloane had been devastated by my abandonment and how I was tearing the family apart over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? That's what he called Sloane slapping me and my parents threatening to disown me. I realized that Sloane had been spinning the story to everyone, minimizing her actions and maximizing my overreaction. She was telling people that we'd had a little fight and that I was holding a grudge and punishing the whole family because of it. This narrative completely ignored the years of sacrifice I'd made and the financial support I'd provided. In Sloane's version of events, I was the villain who had abandoned my family over a trivial disagreement. But the beautiful thing about the truth is that it has a way of coming out eventually, especially when money is involved. And when it did come out, it would be even more devastating because of all the lies Sloane had told to cover it up. 2 weeks before I was scheduled to move to Seattle, Sloane showed up at my apartment unannounced. She looked terrible, stressed, exhausted, and desperate. "Whitney, we need to talk." I let her in, though part of me wanted to slam the door in her face. "I don't know what's happening," she began, "but everything is falling apart at home. Mom and Dad might lose the house. I might have to drop out of school. It's like some kind of curse hit our family all at once." I nodded sympathetically. "That sounds really hard. The thing is," Sloane continued, "I keep thinking about that night when I asked you for shopping money. I know I shouldn't have slapped you. I was stressed about the trip and I took it out on you. I'm sorry." It was the first apology I'd ever received from Sloane. But it was too little, too late. "I appreciate the apology, Sloane. So you'll help us? You'll loan Mama and Dad some money to get through this?" "I can't do that." Her face hardened. "Can't or won't?" "Both." That's when she lost it. "You're really going to let our family lose everything because of some stupid fight? You're going to let me drop out of college because I slapped you one time?" "Sloane, your financial problems have nothing to do with our fight. Everything was fine before that night. It's like you cursed us or something." If only she knew how close to the truth that was. She stormed out, but not before calling me every name in the book. I didn't care anymore. I was done with all of them. My last week in town was peaceful. I blocked most of their numbers after the verbal abuse Sloane had hurled at me, and I was focused on my upcoming move and new job. Then, 3 days before my flight to Seattle, Mom showed up. She looked awful. Her hair was unwashed, her clothes were wrinkled, and she had the look of someone who hadn't been sleeping. "Whitney, please. I'm begging you. We're going to lose everything." "Mom, I'm sorry you're going through this, but I can't help." "Can't or won't?" she asked, echoing Sloane's words. "Won't." She stared at me like I was a stranger. "I don't understand. You have a good job. You've always been responsible with money. How can you just watch your family fall apart?" That's when I decided to tell her everything. Not out of kindness, but because I wanted her to understand exactly what she'd lost when she chose to side with Sloane. "Mom, sit down." I pulled out my laptop and opened my banking records. 3 years of payments. Anonymous donations to the Education Foundation, carefully disguised payments to Dad's business account, prepaid utilities, and dozens of other expenses. "What is this?" she asked, staring at the screen. This is where your financial stability has been coming from for the past 3 years. Those delayed client payments Dad thought he was getting? That was me, sending money to his business account from anonymous sources. Sloan's grant? I was funding it through an education foundation. The reason your utilities never got shut off when money was tight, I was prepaying them months in advance. Her face went white. That's impossible. I showed her the payment records, the foundation documentation, everything. I've been paying Sloan's tuition, $18,000 per semester. I've been supplementing Dad's income, about $2,000 per month. Utilities, insurance, emergency expenses when they came up. All of it. For 3 years. She was staring at the numbers, and I could see her doing the math in her head. That's over $60,000 a year. Try $75,000 when you include all the extras Sloan needed. Her sorority fees, her apartment security deposit, her study abroad trip last summer that she thought Dad's improved business paid for. Mom looked like she was going to be sick. Why didn't you tell us? Because I knew if you knew it was coming from me, you'd expect it forever and Sloan would lose any motivation to appreciate what she had. This way, you felt independent and Sloan felt like she'd earned her opportunities. But why did you stop? I closed the laptop. Because when I needed you to stand up for me, when Sloan slapped me for not giving her money for a shopping spree, you told me I deserved it. You said I was selfish and getting out of line. Dad said he wouldn't accept me anymore if I didn't give Sloan whatever she wanted. Do you remember that? The color drained from her face completely. You praised Sloan for slapping me because I wouldn't give her $800 for shopping money. $800, Mom. I had just sent her semester payment of $18,000 2 weeks before, and you thought I was selfish for not having shopping money ready on demand. She started crying. We didn't know. You didn't know because you never bothered to think about where your good fortune was coming from. Dad's business has been struggling for 3 years, but your lifestyle never changed. Did you ever wonder why? She was sobbing now. Whitney, please. We made a mistake. We'll apologize to Sloan, we'll make this right. You'll apologize to Sloan? Mom, I'm the one who was wronged here. I meant we'll apologize to you. We'll tell Sloan she was wrong. But it was too late. The damage was done, and not just the emotional damage. I had already accepted the job in Seattle. I had already decided to start over. Mom, I'm moving to Seattle in 3 days. I've accepted a position with a Rogerting firm there. She looked panicked. You can't leave. The family needs you. The family needed me before, and you told me I was selfish and out of line. You chose Sloan over me when it mattered. Now you get to live with that choice. I started walking toward the door, but she grabbed my arm. What about the house? What about Sloan's school? I gently removed her hand from my arm. I guess you'll figure it out the same way most families do, by living within your means. That was the last conversation I had with any of them before I moved. Seattle has been everything I hoped for and more. My new job is challenging and rewarding, and I'm finally able to live comfortably on my own income instead of funneling it all to my family. I have a nice apartment with a view of the Sound, I drive a reliable car, and for the first time in my adult life, I'm saving money for my own future instead of funding someone else's present. The first few months, I got dozens of calls and texts that I didn't answer. The messages ranged from desperate pleas to angry accusations to attempted guilt trips. Sloan sent me a particularly nasty text about how I was destroying the family out of spite and how she'd never forgive me for ruining her education. I changed my number. 6 months after I moved, I got a message through LinkedIn from my cousin Blaine, Uncle Curtis's son. He said the family was going through a rough time and asked if I'd be willing to talk to them. I declined but asked him to keep me posted on how everyone was doing, purely out of curiosity. According to Blaine, my parents had to significantly downsize their lifestyle and move to a smaller apartment when they couldn't keep up with all their expenses. Dad's business finally closed, and he took a job working for a former competitor. Mom had to find full-time work for the first time in years. Sloan had to leave State University, but she enrolled at the local community college and got a job waitressing to pay for her classes and living expenses. Blaine said she was really struggling with the adjustment but was learning to manage money for the first time. Uncle Curtis, apparently, had been asking around the family to see if anyone knew why I'd abandoned everyone, and he'd been pretty vocal about what a selfish disappointment I was. I felt a twinge of sadness reading Blaine's update, but no regret. They were living the life they could actually afford instead of the life I'd been artificially funding. Sloan was learning the value of work and money. Mom and Dad were facing the reality of their financial situation. In some ways, I'd done them a favor by forcing them to live authentically. But the real vindication came almost a year after I'd moved. Blaine messaged me again with some interesting news. Sloan had apparently been complaining to anyone who would listen about how I'd ruined her life by moving away and not helping the family financially anymore. But Blaine's mom, Uncle Curtis's wife, had gotten curious about Sloane's version of events and had asked some pointed questions about the timeline. When Sloane mentioned that everything fell apart right after she'd had a small argument with me, Blaine's mom pressed for details. Sloane, not thinking clearly, told the whole story, including the part about slapping me and the family's reaction to it. Blaine's mom was horrified. She couldn't believe that Sloane had actually slapped me or that my parents had supported it. She started asking around to other family members, and soon the whole extended family knew the real story of what had happened that night. The family's opinion shifted pretty quickly once they realized that Sloane had physically assaulted me and that my parents had not only condoned it but threatened to disown me if I didn't comply with Sloane's demands in the future. Uncle Curtis, who had been so vocal about me being a selfish disappointment, got an earful from his own wife about supporting a niece who had slapped her sister and parents who had threatened disownment over shopping money. But the best part of Blaine's message was what happened next. Sloane, feeling defensive about the family's changing attitude toward her, had made the mistake of bragging about how she'd always been able to get whatever she wanted from the family and how she'd put me in my place that night. Blaine's mom asked her how she'd been paying for college, and Sloane explained her grant program and how she'd been selected for it based on financial need and academic performance. That's when Blaine's mom dropped the bomb. She'd been curious about this grant program, so she'd contacted the Education Foundation directly. They had confirmed that the program existed but that the anonymous donor had stopped funding it, which coincided exactly with when I'd moved away. While they couldn't reveal donor information due to privacy policies, the timing made it obvious who had been funding Sloane's education. Sloane tried to deny it, but Blaine's mom had done her homework. She'd figured out that the timing of the funding stopping coincided exactly with when I'd moved away. She'd put two and two together and realized that I had been the anonymous donor funding Sloane's education the entire time. When confronted with this information, Sloane apparently broke down and admitted that she'd started to suspect I was helping financially, but she'd never realized I was funding her entire college experience. The family meeting that followed was apparently epic. Blaine's mom laid out the timeline. Sloane slaps me for not giving her shopping money, the family supports Sloane and threatens to disown me, I move away, and suddenly all the money that had been keeping everyone afloat disappears. She asked the obvious question, if I was so selfish and stingy, why had everything been fine until I left? That's when my parents were forced to admit that they'd been getting mysterious financial help for years that had suddenly stopped when I moved. Dad had to confess that his business loan had never actually existed and that someone had been making his mortgage payments without his knowledge. The family finally understood what they'd lost when they chose Sloane over me. Blaine said the fallout was intense. Sloane was basically shunned by the extended family for her role in driving away the person who had been keeping everyone afloat. My parents were criticized for their favoritism and poor judgment. Uncle Curtis was forced to admit that he'd been wrong to support Sloane's behavior without knowing the full story. Sloane apparently had a complete breakdown when she realized that her entire college experience had been funded by the sister she'd slapped and that her actions had caused her benefactor to disappear from her life. She tried to get my new contact information from several family members to apologize, but no one had it. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Sloane had slapped me for not giving her $800 for shopping, not knowing that I'd been giving her $30,000 a year for her education and living expenses. Blaine's mom asked him to reach out to me with a message. She wanted me to know that the family finally understood what had really happened and that they were sorry for how I'd been treated. She also wanted me to know that Sloane was truly remorseful and had been trying to find a way to contact me to apologize. I appreciated the message, but I wasn't interested in reconciliation. The damage had been done, and I'd moved on to a better life. 2 years have passed since I left, and I'm thriving in Seattle. I've been promoted twice, I'm in a healthy relationship with someone who values and respects me, and I'm finally living the life I want instead of funding someone else's dreams. I heard through Blaine that Sloane eventually transferred to a 4-year school after finishing her associate's degree at community college. She's working multiple jobs to pay for it herself, and according to Blaine, the experience has been humbling for her. She's apparently a very different person now, more grateful, more aware of money, more considerate of others. My parents downsized their lifestyle significantly and seem to be doing okay in their smaller apartment. Dad's new job pays less, but they're living within their means for the first time in years. Mom has actually said that the forced simplification of their life has been freeing in some ways. I'm glad they're all doing well, but I have no desire to resume a relationship with any of them. They showed me who they really were when they supported Sloane slapping me, and I believed them. The fact that they only realized their mistake when the money stopped flowing says everything I need to know about their priorities. Sloane sent me a letter last month that somehow found its way to my office address. In it, she took full responsibility for her actions and apologized not just for slapping me, but for the years of entitlement and taking me for granted. She said she never realized how much I had sacrificed for the family and that she was ashamed of how she treated me. The letter was well written and seemed genuine, but it was also 3 years too late. I didn't respond. Some people might think I'm being too harsh or unforgiving. Maybe I am. But I spent 2 years pouring my heart, soul, and bank account into supporting people who thought so little of me that they praised someone for slapping me. I spent years living like I was broke so they could live comfortably, and the moment I needed them to stand up for me, they chose the person who had physically assaulted me. That's not a family worth having. I've built a new life here in Seattle, surrounded by friends who respect me and a career that fulfills me. I've learned to invest in people who invest in me, and I've never been happier. The best revenge, as they say, is living well. And I'm living very well indeed. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if they had stood up for me that night instead of praising Sloan for slapping me. Would I have continued funding their lifestyle indefinitely? Would I have ever found the courage to prioritize my own life and happiness? I'll never know, but I'm grateful that their betrayal forced me to make a change I might never have made otherwise. In trying to put me in my place, they actually freed me to find my real place, and it's 3,000 miles away from all of them.